So we want to talk about all that you learned in the COVID world.
Well, I don't know what I've learned, but there's definitely a lot of articles going around in church circles and just in general circles about um, how everything's going to change after COVID-19, and we're going to rethink everything. And um, uh, I don't know. My initial response to that, or just my internal reaction, is like, really? I feel like I hear a lot of people who are just like, I just want to get back to normal life. And so, I, but then I read a little bit into them and I think, yeah, we probably will examine some things and come away with some, every world event changes us, but I wonder if they change us as fundamentally as we think. And so anyway, there's that whole thing of what people are saying. I'd love to hear your response to that. But then I thought maybe we could just discuss what we have learned in the past month doing Corona style church, doing church in a different way. Maybe the insights that we're taking away in our unique type of churches from this time. So
Sure.
first
So
of all, what do you think?
really you're trying to give our audience a compelling, really, you know,
No, I'm not.
clickbait oriented podcast.
No,
huh?
we would do something about the Kardashians if we were doing that. This is just coronavirus church. Nobody cares.
I wouldn't mind doing the Kardashians sometime. That'd be actually as a social phenomenon.
If I knew anything about the Kardashians,
Me too. I mean, I'd have to
for
go
us to do
study.
that, I am going to seriously have to like start from total scratch. All I know is their last name starts with a K and it's longer than average. And one of them married Kanye, and the other one's apparently not wearing as much makeup anymore. And I only know that because, when I scrolled the news headlines a couple days ago, there it was. And my thought was, who flipping cares that she's wearing less makeup? So
Apparently, a lot
what
of people do, but
well, obviously.
yeah.
Anyway, that's all I've got on the Kardashians. Episode over. That's all I have.
All right, done. Boom. Yeah, we probably could talk a little bit about them in context of Kanye, but that's about it. Yeah.
Maybe.
So
I still don't know how Kim Kardashian West fits in that equation. I mean, I'm sure she does, but it's like, I don't know where she's at with any of his stuff. Anyway, moving on.
yeah. So COVID. What have we learned? So I'll agree with you, and maybe it's just the contrarian in me, but I have gotten relatively sick of the whole. Not necessarily saying, hey, like we need to think wisely about the future and what it might look like and what the church, how the church responds and what the church might learn. But I am pretty tired of the 10 lessons that you can learn or how to be the most effective church during this COVID time and into the future, how to grow your church. I really like, for instance, the article we discussed last week that referenced Carey Nieuwhof. I like Carey Nieuwhof. I listen to him sometimes. I mean, he's a mega church pastor, so I put him in that, slot, but he has some interesting things to say. And
you have a little subtle thing for mega church pastors. I've just noticed that.
Sure. Yeah. I think that there's some things that small church pastors can learn from mega church pastors. But I think that the idea that he presented that the church is growing now, I think maybe people are looking in a little bit more. But I don't think the church is growing because we're all doing video. In fact, we, at the beginning of our evening service, started singing something along the lines of "Video killed the pastor star" or something like that. But anyway, so I don't know. I think that we should slow down a little bit. We don't need to rush in and be like, let's capitalize on this but maybe that's just because I tend to approach everything as a pastor and not an evangelist, and maybe they're just all evangelists and they're trying to approach it from that perspective.
I think some of these people, get money for their articles and they have more time to write them. And so
Right.
they're writing them and they have to come up with, if you don't say something drastic, like everything's going to change, nobody reads your article.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I mean, what's his name from the guy who does? I mean, he's a big guy in the Southern Baptist world and does all the research. Not Barna, but the other guy.
I don't know.
He's out of Wheaton.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll remember his name in a minute. Yeah, Stetzer. I mean, Stetzer's been pushing this hard about how this is going to change everything, and here's what you need to do, and here's how you got to rethink everything. And
All right. So just let's put the gauntlet falls. Here it is. Two guys with churches under 200.
but together we have a church over 200.
Dang, that's a good point. So us two, what do we think is going to change and not change? This is the lightning round, and then we'll get into what we've learned. What do you think will change and won't change?
You're going to use more video than you used to. Like you're going to have more of these Zoom conversations. People, you may have hybrid meetings now.
More meetings will get kicked to Zoom because we all got used to it.
Yeah, and also people who are shut-ins can now go to your Bible study because somebody can pop them up on Zoom and, they can at least listen in and comment. So I think that
they should do a Zoom. This should be the next development from Zoom, is a Zoom robot. And it's got a screen on its face, and so it can feel in person, but you can have people stream into church or Bible study through the Zoom robot.
Right, except that the Zoom robot goes crazy or something, and you're all a Zoom robot murder.
They ask really divisive questions, or they just keep going off topic, which would be very accurate and would actually feel more like a church conversation.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's some functional changes. I know for us, I mean, in our church is a little bit more intergenerational. We definitely are seeing the need for streaming that will probably happen after we start gathering. So for certain, one of our services will be live streamed so that people who are shut in can see it. We also realize that now that, you don't have the tape ministry anymore. You remember tape ministries?
Oh yeah. Everybody got mailed a tape. I mean, I feel like podcast of the sermon is like kind of the same, but
yeah, I agree, except that we have people who don't have that capacity to listen to a podcast.
Are you bringing back tapes?
Well, I'm like, no, we couldn't. Like, I could order some stuff and maybe we could start doing that, but I don't have the equipment to make tapes for them. I do have equipment to make CDs, but that's just another thing to do. So it's like, wow.
I don't think you're going to do that. See, that's the thing is like, I mean, you could see the need for it in this moment, but I think when life gets back to normal, we're not doing that stuff.
No, we're not going to do that, but we will do the live stream. We will do video into some of our gatherings.
Yeah.
But our Wednesday prayer will never go back to its meeting room. It will just always be Zoom.
Really? You think so? You don't think anybody else in your church is going to be like, no, we want to do this together, like in a highly relational church like ours, or like, especially like yours?
Well, what we found is that at 7:00 in the morning, everybody can just roll out of bed. And so we increased our attendance to our prayer time.
They don't have to put their pants on. Yeah.
Yeah, it doubled. So it went from 4 to almost 8 or 9 praying.
Do you think that's partly because of like the trying times and people not having to go into work? Do you think that'll stay the same when this isn't going on?
Possibly, but even for the 4 people who often go gather and meet, like I think we've all decided, you know what, we're just doing this on Zoom.
Yeah.
So I think it'll stay. That will stay.
Do you think that's going to be good for us to move our prayers to? I've heard from people in our church that praying over Zoom isn't as good. They're just like, this isn't this. Somebody actually was like, can we cut the prayer time from our gathering because it's over Zoom and it's weird?
Yeah, that has not. I mean, we've had some of the more powerful prayer times on Zoom. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, and we've got a complete opposite response
The
from
best
that.
thing about prayer on Zoom is you don't have to close your eyes because you can just hide your screen.
Right.
So then you can actually go to the bathroom. Everybody thinks you're closing your eyes and I'm just kidding. That's not true. But it's a weird thing where you don't know who's watching and who's not. And so some of the people you've got hands folded, eyes closed, and some just go, doop, not sharing my screen. And you're like, they're either just super devout or they're actually not even there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, which is what people really want to do during prayer time is they want to go walk around or actually not be there sometimes. That's
Yeah.
that's a sad thing to say. It's a weird thing with Zoom where you can
Yeah.
be distracted, make dinner during prayer and nobody knows, make dinner during church and nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's the dark side of Zoom.
Mm-hmm. It is.
You don't have to tune in like you do in person.
Yeah. You know, I think probably like our church is really geared towards seeing each other. So yeah, when we start praying, a few people will shut it while they pray, or then they'll turn it back on when they're not praying.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of everything.
So yeah, I don't know. Like I think we'll stick with the prayer thing. I think we'll live stream. I think the hardest part is just this reorienting back. What is it going to look like to be church, you know, in this next few months, and then what's it going to look like then into the future?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an awkward transition back. But I just don't buy the stuff where everybody's like, the whole world's going to be different. And, restaurants are always the tables are always going to be 20 feet apart. And like, I don't think so. I think we'll look back on this as a crazy time. I think some things will have been lost and businesses will have died and changed and churches will, there'll be some changes, but I just, and look, maybe I'm totally wrong and somebody pulls this up in 2 years and just laughs at me, but I think we're going to go back to the way we did it. I just don't think it's going to be so drastic. I think maybe there's a couple things, but I don't think that it's any different than maybe the changes we made during the housing crisis. I mean,
right. You mean like financially?
Yeah, I mean, but what were those? Like how it's hard to even really.
A lot of, there are people who lost jobs and things like that.
Yeah. So it changed us, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing that I have, those are like structural things. I think as a pastor, the part that you struggle with and then is you don't have the visual contact of Sunday.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, you operate off of that visual contact, which is, okay, these 10 people were not at church and these, 70 were, and I touched base and my leaders touched base with these people. So there's a pastoring sense that happens within that 2.5 hours, however long. Our services are about 2.5 hours after meal and everything.
Yeah. Same.
So that's a lot of time to make connection, see how people are doing, know whose kids are sick, what's going on. You have a sense of things. That's completely missing from the COVID experiences. You don't know who was at service, even if, you do from Zoom a little bit.
We actually have a really good idea, yeah, because we're doing it on Zoom.
Right, and you're doing it on Zoom. And that we tried, but I think we tried a little experiment, but I think our community is it's too diverse in its age and its economic stages. So like they either struggle with Zoom or their internet feeds are not as good, or so we just struggle with that. So we don't know. So for us, it's harder. And maybe it's easier for you to know who's at church and what's happening, but that requires a lot more during the week for us to engage with people.
I still don't know that. I think that there are lessons to learn from this time for sure. I think one of those is I've noticed people have tuned in to Zoom who have moved out of town but really love our church.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if we'd done something akin to like having a live stream option, we would have seen some more of that in the past. Now, I don't know if long term, if that's the best move, because I mean, I could very well see myself having just followed my favorite church. Like, I'm thinking about when I moved to Chicago for a year. I had to embed in a church there, which was difficult, but I learned a lot. It was a unique church. It was, and I wonder if what would it have been like if I was like, well, I'm just gonna zoom into my church back home while I'm here and not be present with these people. I think there would have been a benefit in staying connected with people back home because I knew I thought I was coming home. But then I would have missed something too. So I wonder, like long term, if it's really good for people to be able to move away and just kind of go. But then I've heard people who a guy I used to work with who moved out of town for work, and he was like, I cannot find a church here in this new place where, and he kind of referenced, like our church and basically said, I can't find one that's not like cheesy or way off over here. And like the balance that he felt like he'd found at our church, he's like, I can't find it.
Sure.
And I believe that. I can't think of a whole lot of churches, even the city of Tucson, where I would personally be able to go and bring my friends. And
Sure. And it's part of the problem with having a boutique style church.
it is you get I need that.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like your business. If I start buying furniture from your business, I want that type of furniture. I don't want to go then to IKEA anymore. Or I don't want to go to even another boutique because I have a particular kind of branding and style that I enjoy in my home and it makes me feel comfortable. And it's really the same with church is when you begin to act creatively and not uniformly, whatever, that you create a different, and that difference contrasts with other things that people are.
Which is what used to happen with denominations. It was very like Walgreens, right?
Yes.
You used to feel like I can go to another town, find the First Southern Baptist, and it will be very, very similar to the First Southern Baptist where I was from, of course.
More homogeneous.
Yeah, and that's kind of changing, but our churches don't.
Right. Well, and I think our churches don't do that, and so that's partly why our church really encourages people, if they're going to leave our community to go say somewhere else, is to consider themselves as a missionary from our church, even so that when they go to another church, they're bringing the values of the village. They don't demand that they change, but they're bringing a new way of thinking and seeing themselves as a missionary there, so that they're not trying to fit in and say, oh, this feeds me, but I have good things to offer to this community from my past community. And so how do I fit in and offer that in this body, which changes sort of that I'm looking for the place to feed me and be very similar to what I had.
And I like that. And I feel like there's room within that to stay connected to your old church, which would be a beautiful thing. And so somehow, I mean, I guess it could be really cool if we churches, people who moved away, if like once a month there was a Zoom call with a bunch of people from the church who all connected with that person who moved away. And that,
that'd be pretty cool.
Intentionality with that.
Yeah.
But I think just attending the old church while moving away doesn't lend to that missionary mindset of like, I'm going to shape the community I'm in now.
Yeah. And I think we try, and we haven't done this every single time, but a lot of the times when somebody leaves to move, to go to seminary or to go become a doctor or to go to college somewhere, we pray over them and send them out like missionaries.
Yeah.
And bless them, so that there's this thing of like, you're not just leaving, we're actually giving you kind of like what in the ancient times would be a letter of reference. We're praying our blessing on you to go to a new place. So I think that's a big deal in helping orient people to that. It's also like, I think the thing, us being boutique churches, and you have the Walmart churches, if you think in that context, it's still this idea of shopping. And so
Hmm.
I'm going to look for what's best and not where I'm called.
Which I don't like that. Yeah, I want us to, like, if I'm called to this other city and there's a church there, or there's 20 of them, I'm called to one of those for
Right.
some reason, not looking for what they offer. I mean, I think it's like a both and. I think there's something to, like, who am I and what do I need as a growing believer? Like,
Sure.
do I need a place that's going to shame me constantly?
Right.
If I deal with shame, maybe not. But also, like, yeah, looking for a place that's like, where is a place that where I know that I can be discipled and then offer of myself both.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of, I've been thinking, this may be off the track here a little bit, but I've been thinking about how, the fivefold gifts in Ephesians, like evangelism and
Yeah.
shepherding and prophecy. Like, I think that leaders in a community only have one of those gifts, but they exercise all of them. So, for instance, I feel like my gift in that fivefold is pastoring. So I approach evangelism as a pastor, and I approach teaching as a pastor. So I teach like in a pastoring sense. And so I think when you go and look at churches, you're going to find different, like maybe the leaders, or the leader that's more visible is an evangelist. So he's going to approach pastoring as an evangelist, and he's going to approach all of those. And so you're going to experience things differently. And so you have to figure out, well, what stage of my life what do I need right now? What kind of community do I need to be in that context? Do I need to be in a place where there's more strong teaching in the sense of building a foundation, or do I need more care?
And I think the question isn't always just what do I like when you say what do I need. It might be like, at this point in my life, what do I what would be the best thing for me? So I could imagine, for example, if somebody had gone to your church for years and years and years, and they've had this like intensive pastoring, maybe there's a church that needs a pastoring presence,
Right.
because the pastor is more evangelistic, and you go, I've been shaped by the Village, I think I could really offer that, instead of going out and saying, because I've always had an Eric Siepen, I need to find an Eric Siepen.
Exactly.
I mean, I was thinking when we were at a wedding together, and I had just done a wedding the day before, and I was kind of laughing in my head because I was like, this wedding talk that Eric's giving, I would never give. Like, I can't. It's not me. I'm not going to get up and kind of meander about bad poetry. It's just not what I do. It's not my voice. It's not my brain. It's not.
Sure.
Nick would never do what I do quite right. Rod would never do exactly what you or I do. And that's a cool thing. And what I appreciated the most about going to the two weddings, one in which I did and one in which you did, was the completely different angle we came at a wedding.
Yes.
The different point of view we came from, the different side of it we brought out. And I think that, yeah, every pastor is going to do something different. But then in my church context, I need people that are more shepherd-esque around me. And anyway, so if you're moving on looking for another church, you would ask the question, what do I add to the equation, not how do I find the exact same equation. Right. And so anyway, that all this was to say, if you if we broadcast our church and people tune into us when they're in another part of the country or they move away, that brings up a little bit of concern for me. I want some of that, but I don't want that to be all that there is for this person.
Yeah.
What other takeaways from Corona time?
Actually, can I just pause? We'll have to cut this part out, but
press 1 key. Again, press 1.
All right, we're back.
Okay.
So, any other takeaways from? I mean, if you could say like, okay, forget if everything changes or whatever. Any other things that you would say I have learned this about my church in the last month?
I think that I have seen a few of my leaders actually thrive in this more digital crisis eight oriented thing. So people I didn't know were like maybe leaders with crisis skills,
Mm,
like stepping forward. So, and revealing that they had it and they had initiative to
mm,
take, they didn't need anybody to say, hey, would you do this? They were given a little bit of this is kind of what we want to do. And boom, they took off on it and kind of invented their own way of doing it and were creative.
yeah.
And I think that has been cool to see those leaders step up. So it's kind of the crisis has brought leaders to the surface that I didn't expect.
Have you seen the reverse of that at all? Of like folks who, when crisis came, you went, wow, they struggle with crisis. Like they kind of, not that they're not a leader, because that's, you know, that doesn't need to be the case. But did you learn the reverse about anybody?
Well, to be honest, I think, and this would be somewhat true about me, but not completely, is that all of our actual staff outside of our administrator so the three elders are pretty ritual oriented people. So like we
Yeah.
have, I mean, because, and it is sort of the monastic part of why we kind of build out the idea of being monastic, because we are just like, this is what I do, this is how I do it, this is when I
Right.
do it, and I live out my life that way. And so when that gets disrupted, I think it was certainly harder for our other two elders who don't have any administrative gifts, really. Administration is not there to like reshift and figure out how to do it without me and the administrator coming alongside them and trying to help them think that through. And we're still in that process. So I
Yeah.
think that was kind of a revelatory on our
Yeah.
staff.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen both of those things. I've seen people who I feel took leadership on naturally. I've learned something about, I've seen the generosity of some people really on display, that
Yeah,
it just,
definitely.
a
Yeah.
moment like this helps you see. um, I've learned who's more risk oriented and who's more safety oriented. I've learned a little, I have an insight, and even that goes for me too, like learning about myself. But anytime you go through something like this, you learn about people in a new light, and I think that shapes the way that you work together and move forward together in the future.
Yeah.
Would be my assumption.
I mean, I think one of the things I learned about myself is that maybe I am less relationally, like I have less of a basket than I have been operating with for the last 15 years of my life.
I believe that. Like,
And
meaning your capacity for relationships.
yeah,
Have
like,
you been feeling like, with being home a lot and stuff, are you like, okay, this is better?
um, it is, except for, I mean, I live in a community house.
You live
So
in a relational house. Yeah.
yeah, so sometimes I'm like, yeah, having everybody home all the time is not
Yeah.
my thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I also realize that if there's a lot of disorder, which when we hit, when COVID hit and everybody was like in the stay at home thing, I just felt like everything was disorganized. It was disorganized at work, it was disorganized at home, spaces were disorganized. And so I just had to, in order to have a good outlook on things, I needed to take time to organize all these different aspects and get sort of a sense of how to move forward, because I felt like in a lot of areas where it's like, I don't know what we're doing, I don't know how to move forward in this, so it just seems chaotic to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think kind of, yeah, but yeah, capacity wise, even like doing the live stream and then going home. I mean, we do a Zoom call afterwards, and so people jump on Zoom, and I do the morning and Mark does the evening. But I still go home pretty early compared to
Yeah.
when, and
Oh yeah.
I kind of am like, this is nice. Like I just close up church and go home.
Our church time has been much shorter, which makes Sundays much easier.
Yes.
But I also miss. I
Oh
really
yes.
miss,
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
But it's sort of a catch-22. It's a nice reprieve, and yet it's produces a deep longing and makes it difficult to pastor. And I'm assuming that even on Zoom, it makes it difficult for you to pastor. There's definitely a thing about having people in your space, seeing how they interact with one another, watching how they're, kind of listening to the Spirit as you move with them to see what you need to do and where you need to go with things.
Yeah, we have 2 Zooms that we do on Sunday at this time, and so there's the all church one, and then we close that, and then you go into what we're calling our micro churches, which are mostly our pre-existing small groups,
Right?
With a couple added on. I have a feeling that what this is, one effect this is going to have on us is I think our small groups are going to come out stronger. I think we're going to have more people in our small groups than we did because some of them got integrated in through this experience. But so for that, I'm grateful. But where was I going with that? So we do get to like work through. So we always have had the relational time, and we haven't figured out the answer to this or any real clear ideas to this right at this time. But what used to always happen to me at church was, we would get done with the service and I would get this sense that a couple people needed to talk. And usually they kind of had their eyes, like I could see it. It's coming, they're walking down the aisle right at me, right after church. And some people would leave right away. Others congregated in their little friend groups. And then I would usually there'd be 1 or 2 conversations that I would have immediately. And those are usually people who either wanted to work out something that was said or they had something big going on in their lives. We have been, because we're dividing up into these micro churches and we've had questions and time for prayer immediately after the sermon. I feel like the whole church has been invited to process what was just said. And I don't think that, though we would hope that people would sit down together and process, I don't think they really did. I think there was what they felt was like you needed to catch up with each other or whatever. And so I think that's been a really rich addition to our service during this time, is the immediate processing, and that it's not all coming from myself or Nick or John or whoever's preaching. It's divvied up. The leadership of that is divvied up in a big way.
That's interesting. Because
Yeah.
that is hilarious. Because it's just how opposite our churches are. And yet in the same context. So like, you guys, we don't see anybody because we're live streaming, and you have the Zoom, so you kind of have a sense of what's happening. Whereas in our community, because the meal like is so central to our theology and it's just constantly preached about, and the way to operate afterwards, that happens just like organically. People are talking about the sermon, how it applies, what's happening in their life, inviting new people to have that conversation. So now when people hop on Zoom, it's the complete opposite. That's been completely killed, and everybody wants to know, well, what's actually happening in your life? What's going on? Like, what's the news? Kind of. So we have none of that in our Zoom calls or anything like that.
Well, most of our like the micro churches that follow up with those questions also have a midweek time. And that time was normally primarily prayer and like, maybe studying something. And most of those groups have said, during that time, we felt more the need to check in with each other. So our midweek time has
That's awesome.
But Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, our pilgrim groups have been very consistent and actually better attended, which are our men and women's Bible studies, and we separate those out, so they're more what people might call intentional discipleship. Sure. And then we have once a month gatherings that are like your groups. And those haven't been very successful. Like they actually haven't met. Like a few of them have, but for the most part, they haven't met because it's once a month and people are just trying to like figure out what's happening. And so it's just like, yeah, we'll just kind of let those fall until we all get back together.
And people are getting zoomed out, as I would.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Is like, I think the one thing I learned is I can't do this many Zoom calls.
It's exhausting. Yeah.
But I do think like I will probably, if I don't see somebody in a week or two, and instead of giving them a call, I might text them and say, "Hey, let's hook up on Zoom so I can see your face and see how you're doing."
It's definitely been a more effective, like a friend we both have has moved out of town, and connecting with him, like a phone call might have happened in the past, but a Zoom call has been working way better.
Yeah.
For example. Yeah.
No, I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of other things, but who knows, right?
Compelling podcasting, how to be a pastor in COVID.
Well, I think that's what I don't want to hear anymore of, because it's like, I think we're all in the thick of it and we're all figuring that out. But what we're going to actually take away is, I think, worthwhile to process. And I sort of hope that people from our churches interact with this, either, by commenting, emailing us, faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
We're saying,
or just,
we don't have any of those experiences that you guys are talking about in your church. What's going on?
Yeah, they're like, I don't feel like you think everybody's close. We're not, No, I would love to hear. I'd love to hear how, because this is always the case with church. The pastor and the staff perception of how church is going versus the perception of people who are attending is very different. And often they don't understand each other's perspective. So for those of us who are, this is the vocation or the primary vocation or whatever, and our heads are in it, we're thinking about it all the time. We have this sense of how church feels, and it may not be accurate. So I'd love to hear from people who feel like, they attend our church, though they're not. I know people are more involved in our churches than others, but still ones who are like, well, I'm not steeped in it day in, day out. I go to I'm in my other world the rest of the time, and I just experience it when I come in. So
sure.
I'd be curious to hear from them.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I'm speaking of church, we're going to put in some new windows tomorrow because it's a great time, because we can get a room dusty and have it closed down for a little bit. So I got to go pick up those windows.
Cool.
Yeah.